Just two people who hadn't emailed me before, so they can join when they get here. But thanks, everyone. Really excited to get the committee meeting started. Thanks for being patient with myself and Monique as we kind of got across our scheduling difficulties last week and got this first meeting set up. We're super excited to really dig into everything with the team here. So I put together a short presentation for today, which just kind of covers the agenda and some of the topics that we'll be going through. Okay, so we'll start with an intro and a short icebreaker inspired by the Chrysalis Labs team. I wanted to take a second to review just kind of what the goals of the subcommittee are for the upcoming months. I think we're all kind of aligned on the full vision, but just what we want to spend April and some of May kind of focusing on. And then we'll hand it over to Lieutenant Snively, who walked myself and the Chrysalis Labs team through an excellent report of the data that he's put together. I had also sent over a couple other sources, so the use of force policy and an online transparency portal that BPD provides. But I thought for this meeting, it'd be great for him to present to everyone like he did to us. Otherwise, it would just be me doing a poor impression. And then we'll have some time for discussion. And of course, as we go through that, feel free to drop any questions you have or ask any questions you have, and we'll address them as we go through it. And then we'll end by just scheduling the next meeting. Scheduling over emails individually is kind of tough. So just want to kind of talk through what meeting cadence makes sense for everybody and go ahead and get that on the calendar. And then Major Harrell has actually offered up the subcommittee to do use of force training that the BPD goes through themselves. And so I thought what we could do is kind of talk through what dates make sense for us. There's a portion of it that can be virtual. And then there's a portion of it that is required to be in person. So we know everyone's kind of got different comfort levels there, and that's okay. But Major Harrell's assured us that the in-person training, of course, everyone's going to be socially distanced. This is something that they have kind of perfected the art of doing during COVID times because all the officers that have been coming onto the force have to go through the same training as well. So there will definitely be precautions in place for anyone who has any concerns. But like I said, there is a portion that can be scheduled virtually for anyone who doesn't want to do anything in person. We, of course, understand. And that will be the end of the session then. So why don't we go ahead and get started? First of all, thanks everyone for sending in your, there might be some chat messages, so I will pull them up to the side here so I can see them. Perfect. So thanks everyone for your responses. I put everyone's responses and put them in a word cloud. I think I maybe stole that idea from Mindy in one of our social justice full commission meetings. But I thought it was interesting. I mean, everyone kind of responded in sentences, but when there were some pretty cool themes that came across it, right? So we're really focused on ourselves. In Brookhaven, you'll see community and country show up a lot, right? A lot of local focus here. We want to take a look at issues that may be arising amongst homeless populations, between BIPOC populations that are represented here, taking a look at training and policy. So you can already start to see where everyone's head is at and why everyone is kind of interested in being part of this subcommittee. So I thought I would just kind of share that very quickly to kind of show that, you know, everyone's relatively aligned with how we want to move forward here. But in terms of the quick intro, name, of course, for the whole team, and I'd like the staff liaisons to participate as well. Any interests that you think might be relevant, any experience. We have some social workers on the committee. We have ex-LEO on the committee. I think it'd be great if you guys are comfortable just kind of sharing some of your experience and your background that kind of leads you here. And then a fun story about your name. That's the icebreaker part. And it could be anything about your name, someone who shares a name with you. Spoiler alert, that will be mine. You know, anything that could be interesting. So I'll go ahead and start. My name is SJREC Arif. I am a Brookhaven resident. I live right off of Briarwood and Kusawati area here in Brookhaven Village. I was interested in this because it, you know, there's of course kind of been a theme around it in terms of societal change over the past few months, but I thought looking at all the subcommittees that existed, this is something that just piques my personal interest, something I've always been interested in learning how Brookhaven operates and what kind of the policies and procedures are here, and thought it would be a great opportunity to learn more as well as be able to kind of guide any change that we think we might see here. And then the fun story about my name. So my first name is SJREC. Unfortunately or fortunately, it depends on your perspective. SJREC is the name of one of the most famous Bollywood actors in the 90s who's known for really cheesy romantic movies. And he is so popular that I was on a work trip to Peru and in a cab, and the taxi driver in broken English explained to me how I was named after his favorite actor. And that's not the first time that's happened to me. So it's not my favorite movies, wasn't named after him by any stretch of the imagination, but kind of continues to follow me to this day. And so I will go ahead and popcorn over to Davis.
Hey guys, I am Davis Burnett. I live off of Donaldson Drive in Danbury Park, so just behind Blackburn Park there. I am a 14-year veteran of law enforcement in Alabama. I served with the city of Montgomery, Alabama, which has an extremely checkered history with regards to law enforcement and civil rights. And then I worked for a small county just north of there. And I'm really interested in this because I'm interested in the future of law enforcement. I love law enforcement. I love our country, but I see a burning need, and I have a great desire to help be the change and help steer the change that law enforcement needs to look at. And there needs to be some reform. And I think that I offer a very unique perspective in that I'm not 100% pro-police and I'm not 100% de-police. As we hear so many people, I'm very much in the middle, and I have a great point of view from both sides. For my name is Davis, which means son of David. I'll give you 3 guesses what my dad's name, but the most interesting thing about that is between my son, who's also David, and 2 brother-in-laws and a nephew-in-law, there are 5 Davids and only 1 Davis in my family. So it's kind of a running joke that I'm the only S. So they no longer call me by my name when I'm home in California. They just say S and I answer. So.
Thanks, Davis. Do you want to pass the baton to somebody?
Oh, I can't even see everybody. So Janice Niece is who I choose. She's next.
Hello, my name is Janice, and it's Nisi with
Nisi. Sorry.
You pronounce the E on the end. But anyway, we've lived in Brookhaven for like 40 years. We were off of Harts Mill Road for 38 years. The last 3 years we've been in an apartment on Peachtree, right near the Brookhaven MARTA station. And I've been interested in this committee a couple of different reasons. One thing, I've had a relative who's been homeless, so I'm interested in that aspect and how the police handle the homeless. He's also had several confrontations or different kind of acquaintances with police and the prison system. So I'm interested from that aspect, and learning more about how you do handle people, particularly who might have some mental issues. And my name, Janice, it really is a combination of Jane and Francis from what I looked up, but I was named after my mother. Her name was Jane Marie. So she didn't want me to be a plain Jane, so she named me Janice. Okay, and I'll pass to Connie, because like Davis, I can't see everybody, but Connie.
Hello, everyone. My name is Connie. I live in Brookhaven on Thornwell Drive. And we've been here, we built here 15 years ago. So we've been here for 15 years. I am from Atlanta, although I've lived other places. My interest, wow, it goes deep. My interest is because I want to be a change agent and for, you know, from a lot of perspectives in terms of maybe some personal, not maybe, personal examples of why police brutality needs to be looked at, or use of force. And then, you know, I mean, goodness, look at what's happening today in our world in just about every city or state, which is alarming and of concern, especially when you look at the disproportionate numbers of who is actually impacted. You know, I've got interests around how the unconscious bias and even police trauma, you know, I've got just an interest to sort of dig a little deeper and be more a part of the conversation there. My background is I co-own a small leadership development firm, and we do a lot of leadership development, executive coaching, culture changing, and also diversity inclusion work. So there's that part of the interest as well. Fun story about my name. You probably noticed there's no E on my name, and you're probably thinking I misspelled it. Well, you can blame that on my mom, whose name is Connie with an E. So plain Jane, I hear you. I think they ran out of names. I'm one of 7. So, you know, I'm named after my mom, but sort of. Her name is Constance, and her nickname is Connie with an E. Mine, Connie with an I. Last thing I'll say about my name is I'm 92 years old, and I've never had, I'm not really 92, but I'm older than most of you. But I've never had a bank account that I didn't have to send the checks back or send the debit card back. No matter how much I highlight CONNI, there's an auto something that happens that adds an E to my name. So glad to be here. Oh, and I am going to select Lieutenant, is it Snively?
It is Lieutenant Snively. You can call me David, but I'm very impressed that you pronounced my name correctly. It's almost always Snively. People want to, and I try to say it's a long I. I have no idea where the name comes from. So yes, my name is David Snively. I'm a lieutenant at the Brookhaven Police Department. Some of you may know already, I oversee our training and certification unit, which includes new hire selection, background investigations, our state accreditation processes, and of course, our training division. By way of background, I actually started in law enforcement when I was 14 as a police explorer. It's an internship program available to young people who have an interest in law enforcement. At 18, I was hired as a 911 dispatcher. And then in 2011, I was hired by the Smyrna Police Department, and I came to Brookhaven shortly after they became a city. I got here in April of 2014. In terms of my interests, so in addition to my professional endeavors, I'm still a student. I'm slowly collecting degrees. I should have found a cheaper hobby, but I'm enjoying it. My undergraduate work was in criminology at the University of West Georgia. I studied public administration for my master's at Kennesaw State, and my thesis there was on police use of social media. And now I'm finishing my PhD at Georgia State. I'm writing my dissertation. My research focuses on police legitimacy, police training and education. So I'm really excited to be here and be a part of the conversation. I think like all of you, we all sort of get to bring a cool perspective to it. So I'm really excited to share mine and to hear yours. And so I'm gonna try to see more people. How about Kathy Wells? Can I push over to you?
Hello, hi. Well, my name's Kathy Wells. I lived in Brookhaven for the extent of my life. I attended Old Department University. I only had a 25-mile radius for many, many years. So I know Brookhaven in and out, all around. And in our conversations in the larger meetings, I always kind of like chime in. I'm from the Linwood Park community, a great community that the oldest Black community in DeKalb County at one point. And we went through gentrification, but we're still out there preserving our history. I am interested, my interests are like all over the place, but I'm interested in this particular committee because I have worked with the Brookhaven police with the Linwood Park Day. And have been very impressed with the police in Brookhaven. They're very well informed, they're friendly, they're just good people from my experience. And also because in living in Linwood Park, which was a Black community, police are always in Black community, whether they're just on point or you could have all saints living there. It's always going to be police there, police presence. And so back in the 90s, they had a great program where the police came in and they had community policing, which was a very effective program. I must say that I wasn't for it at first, but it turned out to be really great. And actually, it won a national award because of that program. So I was really interested in policing after I see what's happening around Georgia and the nation. So that has been my also interest. Okay, my name is Kathy. You know how common that is, going to college, grade school, you say Kathy, 1,000 hands go up, right? My mom didn't have any real reason for it. My sisters had names like Margaret, and then we called them Peggy. All right. My name is totally that, but I won't tell you my middle name. I was named after my aunt, and I'm never going to say it. So that's basically it for me, and that's who I am. Thank you very much, and let's see who I can throw this to. Hey, any suggestions? I can't see anyone else. Who else do we have?
How about Zaki Anwar? We're just doing the icebreaker.
That'd be great.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Zaki Anwar. Been living in Brookhaven since 1997. So it's good over 25 years now. Grew up in India, southern part of India, Bangalore. Moved to the US to do my graduate studies and been living here since then. Professionally, I work in in the IT consulting space. And interests, I'm very closely associated with the Brookhaven Islamic Center here off of the Briarwood Road. A lot of the new construction that is happening for the city buildings is actually behind the property that we have, the mosque. So one of the interests is, how, because we interact a lot with the different police officers, we used to have a lot of DeKalb police officers help us out many a times. And since then, after that, we've been very closely working with the Brookhaven police. So one is, interest is how, because in our community, we have a lot of people from many different countries, North Africa, Southeast Asia, Middle East, and, to provide that extra perspective on, who we are, and, certainly very different people, but want to be contributing citizens here, and certainly want to make sure that the perspective of how people can sometimes behave differently, and some of the phobia that could be out there in the media can be, so different than what actually people can and are. So I want to share those perspectives and also make sure that we are, respectful of the police, and also communicating of who we are and the different things that we do within our sphere. Fun story about my name. The region that I come from in India, the middle name is actually your name. So, the concept of first name and last name doesn't really exist. And I remember when I first was applying for my passport, I was confused as to what's my first name and what's my last name. And then my official name is actually Muhammad Zaki Anwar Arifullah. It's a pretty long name. And, that's how I go by. But, Zaki Anwar is actually my name. And, Muhammad is the family, and Arifullah is my father's name. So it can be very confusing for people who are not, because within India, you have a lot of different combinations and permutations of how traditions determine the way you're named. So, it's a different conversation, but that's about me, and really looking forward to be a part of this group and to put our perspectives. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Okay, Jeremiah, do you want to go next?
Yeah, my name's Jeremiah. I'm that weird guy that doesn't actually live in Brookhaven, but I work in Brookhaven. I work for the Salvation Army in Brookhaven, running our social services. So I do our emergency financial assistance, but then I also run our homeless day center. And so that's a lot of where my interest kind of came for joining the committee, and then this subcommittee specifically. Developed a really good relationship with BPD, as we always need assistance. Really love Officer Moore, by the way. I want to shout out to her. She's fantastic. But really developed a good relationship with Brookhaven Police, and really appreciate what you guys do. And it just seemed really interesting to come alongside, learn more, and then also advocate for the voice of the clients that I see. What is their experience as homeless people, dealing with Brookhaven Police and police in general, and just the idea of what, our nation's struggling with. So those are my interests for the committee. I'm a huge Atlanta United fan. That's my interest personally outside of work. But yeah, I'm also a part-time therapist. So therapy, Atlanta United, and social work are kind of my interest. My name, I am not named after a bullfrog, but I have had multiple strangers sing that song to me. It actually surprises me sometimes when I say my name and people don't sing at me at this point in life. And I do actually have people ask me if I know that there's a song that has my name in it, and that usually leads them to sing it. Half the time I say no just to see what they'll do. But I'm not named after it at all. My dad's favorite prophet, he's a preacher. My dad's favorite prophet is Jeremiah. So that's why I cry a lot. That's why, yeah, no, my name's, you don't meet a lot of Jeremiah, so I really love my name. Aside from when strangers sing at me. That's me. I don't know if there's anybody left. Is there anybody left?
Major Harold, do you want to go?
Hi, sure. I'm Major Shamita Jones Harrell. I'm with Brookhaven Police Department, been there since the beginning in 2013 when we formed. I have about 20 years of experience in law enforcement. I'm originally from Huntsville, Alabama. So Davis, I don't know if you share the same love as I do for the Tide, but if so, roll Tide. I started out at Jacksonville State University, graduated from there, and then I was recruited by a program that recruited college students. It was a law enforcement program called the Job Corps, the Police Corps. It originated, it was a federal program that was funded during the Clinton administration. And the purpose of that program was to get educated students and place them into law enforcement to engage in community, and it focused mostly on community engagement. I started out at College Park, did there 13 years at College Park, and then I came at Brookhaven to help with the startup there. And I am currently over Support Services Division. And one of the units that is within my division is the Community Engagement Unit. And Officer Moore, she is great. She is fantastic. I absolutely love her. She's one of my best. And also Lieutenant Snively is under me as well with the training division, and he does a great job with that. I have a very strong interest in law enforcement, obviously, because I've been in it for 20 years. And then also being a mother is one of my top priorities, having 2 boys. I definitely have a vested interest in the future, law enforcement and everything that surrounds that. I think we're only just one small, intricate part of this entire situation. And anything that I can do to be, to help with that and to move us forward is the reason why that I'm here. It's the reason why that I do what I do. My name, Shamita, is kind of a funny story behind that. My aunt actually named her daughter, and also my cousin, her sister's daughter, and our names kind of rhyme. It's Shamita, Tamitra, and Sarita. I don't know why my mom let her name me, but she did. But the origin of my name is Hindi. The spelling is different, but the origin is Hindi, and the meaning is peacemaker, ironically. So I guess I kind of followed my path. Maybe my aunt didn't know what she was doing. But I'm very happy to be here, and we are willing to serve you all the best way possible and help any way that we can.
Awesome. Thank you. And then last but not least, we'll let Mindy. Mindy's actually going to be working closely with us as a commission. She's the representative that Chrysalis Labs. And so she'll be, helping me and Monique out quite a bit, I'm sure, to make sure we're actually keeping things moving along. So
Yes, thank you. I know you're probably wanting to move along, so I'll keep it fast, but I just did want to say hi to everyone. And, since you can't see all the squares, that you guys know that I was here, and I'm excited to be here and work alongside all of y'all. My interests in general are, I have a dog and a cat. I'm pretty obsessed with them, and have only become increasingly obsessed with them, being stuck with them 24/7. And then in terms of serving on this committee, everyone here knows, understands, and how important this work is, and the impact, both positive and negative, that policing can have on a community. And so I just so appreciate everyone's dedication to digging into this and giving it their best go. So, fun story about my name. I pronounce my last name Cow, but really in Mandarin it's pronounced Gao, and what that means is tall. So that's my interesting name story.
awesome. Thanks, Mindy. We're happy to have you on board. Okay, so why don't we get moving? I had promised Lieutenant Snively that he'd get in for the first 30 minutes and out, so I apologize for that. But I have just a couple slides. We can kind of zoom through them very quickly just to help us understand what we want to accomplish over the next couple of months. So this is kind of a calendar chart that was shared with the subcommittee chairs while we were kind of going through and setting up the structure. So as you'll see, the first couple of months, and we're starting here in April, is really focused on digging into the data. So I don't want anyone to feel pressured that we need to come up with any sort of solutions or have any aha moments in today's session. Today is really about intaking all the information we're getting, having an open discussion around it, and then using that to look at other data sources that have been provided to us, looking at the policies, doing the training, and then really using that to move forward into the assessment and the stakeholder engagement in the following months over the summer. So what that means is the goal for today is getting to the right question. If you remember from our last commission meeting where the Chrysalis Labs team kind of walked us through how to analyze the data, I took this blurb directly from this their slide. I thought it was good to kind of level set here. It's remember, data is a tool, not the answer. Use it like a flashlight to guide you in the right direction, to recommend solutions that support self-determination and maximize impact. So again, it's all about looking at the data, understanding the data, making sure that we're holding each other accountable, that we're interpreting the data correctly, and then using the resources that Major Harrell and Lieutenant Snively have provided to us to say, okay, this makes sense. Maybe we can get a different look at this data, right? And see if there are questions that can come out of the data that lead us to more data to kind of help us understand any trends or patterns that we're starting to see. And they will, trust me, keep us honest on what's actually realistic to deliver. But they have some pretty powerful reporting tools, it sounds like, and have really gotten us a lot. And then, like I said, understanding the data today, and then moving into understanding the policies to determine really what the right questions are as we get ready for the assessment and the stakeholder engagement. And with that, I will stop. I will hand it over to Lieutenant Snively. And Ulysses, I'm not sure if you have given him share permissions already, but he will need it.
Yeah, it looks like I do. So I'm going to try to share with you guys. Let's see. Oh, yeah, okay. Can you all see my data analysis, this PDF cover screen? Yeah, I see some thumbs up. Okay, cool. So I'm going to kind of move just so that I can look at the data with you. I'm moving this tile screen across. So if you raise a hand, I think I'll be able to see it. But if not, feel free to just pipe in. I want to tell you guys that I'm super bummed that I didn't follow instructions and I didn't get to tell you my cool name story. So just want you to know I'm named for both of my grandfathers. I know you were anxiously wondering where my name came from. I'm David Thomas, and my grandfathers were Thomas Anthony and Robert David. So my mom merged those together. Okay, now we can start. The last thing I'll share with you, if you haven't realized it already, I talk very fast. I'm sorry, it's who I am as a person. I will try very hard to slow down. But if there's a point that I miss or that you don't understand, please don't hesitate to ask. Okay, so let's get started. So this report was compiled as part of our requirements through the Georgia Law Enforcement Certification Program. Some of you may already know that the Brookhaven Police Department is accredited, although they use the word certified, by the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police. This is a voluntary certification program that police agencies can seek. There's about 650 police departments in the state of Georgia. Of those, about 158 are certified agencies. And what that means is that we provide proof that we comply with about 150 industry best practices. And part of those are that we conduct an analysis of all of our use of force and all of our arrest and citation data for evidence of bias-based policing practices. So this is a report that we compiled in partial compliance with those 150 or so standards. I tell people every time we onboard a new officer to the police department that we can't know how well we're doing in our job, or we can't really know what our job is if they don't know the mission statement. So before they leave me and start field training, they have to be able to tell me what the mission statement is and what it means to them. So I'll share with you for anybody who doesn't know, but the mission of the Brookhaven Police Department is to enhance the quality of life for those within our community by providing professional, high quality, and effective police services in partnership with the community. And to that end, I think this data report shows the professional, high quality, and effective, and presenting to you guys shows that partnership with the community. So the first thing that we did is we tried to assess our agency demographics, right? One of the most popular considerations right now is, do our police departments match our city? And so we see that we employ 73% male officers. By contrast, 52% of our residents are male and 27% female, as compared to 48% of our residents are female. I will tell you that industry-wide, the national average for this female percentage is 12.5%. So we're very proud that we more than double that. But some work to do still to be more representative of our community. In terms of our agency demographics for race and ethnicity, and we're going to talk a little bit later about how race and ethnicity are defined by the FBI and how that affects our reporting. But for this report, we're using our self-reporting data, how our applicants identify themselves to the Human Resources Department when they're hired. And what this chart shows is we employ 3% Asian officers, as compared to 5% of our community is Asian. 22% of our police officers are Black or African American, as compared to 10% of our residents. We have 17% identify as Hispanic or Latino, compared to 30% of our city. 1 in 1 for Pacific Islander, 55% to 53% white, and 1% of both our officers and our residents identify as 2 or more races. Our crime statistics. So I want to share with you all that our crime statistics are reported now through a program called NIBRS, which is the National Incident-Based Reporting System. You may, if you start doing some searching for crime data, you may see something called FBI UCR. And the Uniform Crime Report was used until 2019. And what that report did is it summarized the crimes that were happening in a community. So for example, if someone went and robbed a gas station tonight, and they entered carrying a gun, they pointed the gun at 2 customers, and then they shot and killed the clerk during that robbery, UCR would report that as 1 homicide and no other crime. By contrast, NIBRS would report that as 1 homicide, 1 robbery, and 3 aggravated assaults. So the difficulty in NIBRS is going to be, for a little while, it's going to be difficult to compare historical data because we're using 2 different systems. But moving forward, we're going to have a lot more robust data that's a lot more ingenuous, that's describing exactly the sort of crime trends that are happening here. And I'll share with you that NIBRS has been around since the early 90s, and the FBI delayed rolling it out because they didn't want to create a data comparison problem. So instead, they created 30 more years of data comparison problems. So, but using NIBRS, the way that we broke down, so we pulled our kind of historical, what are the predominant crimes against persons and property. In 2020, Brookhaven had 2 murders, 9 rapes, 82 robberies, 107 aggravated assaults, which in Georgia is an assault with the intent to rape, murder, or rob, or an assault with a deadly weapon. 163 burglaries, 176 motor vehicle thefts, and just shy of 1,200 larcenies or thefts. Calls for service, this total number includes calls that were canceled, anything that we started and initiated a police dispatch for And we broke it down by both citizen-generated calls for service and officer-initiated calls. So 98,575 total calls for service. Of those, about 22% or 22,000 were citizen-generated, and about 75% of those were officer-initiated. Those officer-initiated calls are area checks, residential patrols, business checks, things of that nature, traffic stops, all the sort of things that you'd expect police officers to be doing when they're not responding to calls for service. So, excuse me. So what we want to know from there is kind of where are our calls for service originating, and how does that match up with our staffing, and how does that match with our officer-initiated activity? So in this first chart, you see that our citizen-initiated calls for service, these are calls that were placed by a resident or someone in Brookhaven to the 911 center at the time a crime was occurring. And you see that just right at a third, 33.2% of those calls originated in 10 beat. I think you guys got this in the email yesterday, but just for point of reference, this is the police beats map. So you see down here where can you all see my mouse hovering over the yellow? Okay, so this yellow point here is beat 15 and beat 25. Those were just created at the end of last year as some of the new annexations. And in fact, we only have about 2 months of data for them, which is why their numbers are so low. The rest of the beats work from south to north. So you have 10 beat here. This is the Buford Highway corridor, or excuse me, this is Interstate 85. Buford Highway is right here. This is 10 beat, 20 beat, 30, 40, 50, and 60 beat. So they kind of work from south to north. And you can kind of have that in your mind as we look at these. So right at a third of our calls originating in 10 beat. 15 and 25, I mentioned we only have 2 months worth of data. We've got some calls because there was some difficulty getting all of the addresses geo-verified and validated in the 911 system. You'll see some calls with no beat assigned. The majority of those fall within 15 and 25 beats, and that's why they'll be assigned for 2021. So then we will say, okay, well, so what's the comparison, right? How are our officers spending their time? And we see our officers are spending just at a quarter of their time in 10 beat. And then sort of on through. So I think the best way to look at these data is side by side. So in the gold, you have our resident initiated or our citizen initiated calls for service. And in blue, you have our officer initiated. So you see in 10 beat, 33.33% are citizen initiated, and just over 25% of our officer initiated activity happening in the same space. So as you move further down, you start to see in 40 beat, we have officer initiated activity higher than citizen initiated. We expect that is due to two things. First, traffic enforcement on Peachtree Road, largely in response to the pedestrian crossing near MARTA. That's where a number of our pedestrian fatality crashes have happened. And it's also where a number of people have complained about speeding cars and having difficulty crossing the road. In 50 and 60 beat, that's similar. These officer-initiated activity well above the citizen-generated, these are generally in response to what we call problem-oriented policing, which means you can call the police and say, hey, I'm going to be out of town during these days, and I'd like you to stop by and check my house. And all of those result in officer-initiated activities. All right, so let's talk about our arrest data. Arrests in Georgia fall into only two categories. We have felonies and misdemeanors. A felony is any crime that's punishable by death, imprisonment for life, or by imprisonment for more than 1 year, more than 12 months. And a misdemeanor is anything that's not a felony. So in Georgia, that just means anything that is punishable by 364 days or less. There are three types of arrest that we record. The first,
Snively, can you make that a little bit larger, or is that impossible to do?
you know what? I'm sure that I can. Let's see. Does that make it a little easier to read?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I had it set to the full page. Yeah. So, in fact, yeah, I think I can get it all there. So three types of arrests that are possible. One is an on-view arrest. This is a warrantless arrest. That means that the crime occurred within the officer's immediate presence or within the officer's immediate knowledge. So an example of something within their immediate presence would be a police officer who sees a car failing to maintain lane, makes a traffic stop, and ultimately arrests the driver for DUI. Something within their immediate knowledge might be an officer who responds to a family violence call, determines that there's probable cause to identify the predominant aggressor and makes an arrest, and then seeks a warrant afterwards. Those would be on-view arrests. By contrast, a person who's taken into custody And again, we didn't get to pick names. I think we could have made this a lot clearer. But the taken into custody means that a person is arrested as a result of a previous and outstanding warrant through our agency or another agency, or as a result of a report that Brookhaven has previously made. So in other words, if I go to that family violence call and the offender's already left, but as I'm leaving the call, I find him walking down the street, that person would be taken into custody pending a warrant. And then about 40% of our total arrests are not actually arrests at all. These are persons who are summoned or cited. What this category is people who we could have arrested and physically taken to jail to be fingerprinted and photographed and post a bond, but instead we released them on a citation or a summons to appear in court. We started using this more in 2020, both because of COVID and because the state of Georgia gave us a new charging document, the Georgia Uniform Misdemeanor Complaint Form, which allowed us to release more people without taking them to jail. All right, so I'm going to back out here to the full screen view. So in 2020, we had 2,200 total arrests. 915 of those were, again, not custodial arrests. Those are people we released. 469 felony charges, just over 2,000 misdemeanor charges. And the number of charges, a person can be charged with more than one offense, which is why those numbers don't add up perfectly. But we see 40% released, about 38% taken into custody, and the balance were warrantless arrests. So the next thing that we think is really important to understanding the data and to understanding how we can kind of compare these data is to understand who we're arresting. And so one of the ways we look at this is by residency. And residency refers to whether or not the person is a resident of the city of Brookhaven without regard to their legal status, right? Just a matter of whether or not they live inside our city limits. And we find that 2/3, 2 out of 3 people who we arrest do not live in the city of Brookhaven. They are not residents here. And this becomes important when we try to look at demographic data, because it helps us understand that the census data for the city of Brookhaven is a bad benchmark against which to look at the demographic data for our arrestees, because 2 out of 3 of those people don't live here. When we look at arrest by ethnicity, so this is a standard that we follow. It's handed down to us from the FBI to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and then to local police departments. And they follow the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB standard. And the OMB says that race and ethnicity are 2 separate and distinct categories. And so what they tell us is that there are 5 minimum categories for race, and those categories are white, Black or African American, American Indian or Alaskan Native, Asian and Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander. And I've in the packet that you all got, you've got the citations there that'll take you to the census explanation. By contrast, ethnicity is defined as either Hispanic or Latino, or not Hispanic or Latino. Those are the only 2 options. Hispanic or Latino is defined as a person of Cuban, Mexican, Puerto Rican, South or Central American, or other Spanish culture or origin, regardless of race. And so in 2019, when we transitioned to the NIBRS system, we as a police department decided that this was a really important piece of data to capture. The state doesn't require it, the federal government doesn't require it, but our reporting system allows us to ask an arrestee whether they identify as Hispanic or not Hispanic, and we can capture those data. So 2020 was the first year that we required that, and we came up with these data showing that 63% of our arrestees were not Hispanic and 37% did identify as Hispanic. Moving to arrests by race, we find that 57% of our arrestees are white, 42% are Black. We didn't record any arrests of American Indian or Pacific Islanders, 1% identified as Asian, and we've got just 4 arrests, and those are just data flaws where we did not record a race for those 4 arrestees. In arrests by age, you kind of see this what you would expect to be a very normal bell curve distribution consistent with the literature on policing, right? Crime sort of peaks by your 30s and then starts to taper off. Where you'll see a jump in your data is this 50 to 59 group. And I call that to your attention just to say that in all of these other groups, we reported that in 5-year increments. For 50 to 59, that's a 10-year increment. If we take that down to 5 years, it smooths this bell curve out. But this was just an easier visual representation to fit the page. Arrests by sex, 77% of our arrestees are male and 23% of them are female. All right, citations and warnings. So what we're looking at here is about 58% of the total traffic contacts we have result in a warning, a written warning. There may be more verbal warnings, but we don't have a way to record that, right? So this is just our written warnings. And 4,725 citations. So it comes out at 58 to 42%. Two reasons we saw this in 2020. For the first part of the pandemic, we encouraged our officers not to make traffic stops unless they absolutely had to. So we saw some more tickets written than normal. Last year, I think this was closer to about a 65% warnings. The other thing is, if we remove those 915 non-custodial arrests from this citation total, so that we're not counting them in both places, this kind of becomes, let's see, I've got it here, about a 36% citations to 64% warnings. All right, so there's some limitations in our citation data. So for our arrestees, again, I told you our reporting software allows us to capture the ethnicity of a person who's arrested and their residency. Our traffic citations and the uniform misdemeanor citation don't allow us to do that. Those forms are created by the Georgia legislature. The legislature prescribed the uniform traffic citation. It's created by the commissioner of the Department of Driver Services. And the misdemeanor citation form was created by a committee of the Georgia Supreme Court. And I'm just going to quickly show them to you. Hopefully none of you have ever seen one of these. This is a traffic ticket. I hope that we've not ever seen one, but I have. The traffic citation, and it's a little blurry, but these are all of the pre-filled blocks that we can fill in. It doesn't include race or ethnicity. And same thing, the uniform misdemeanor citation has the same blocks as the traffic citation, and you can see it doesn't let us do race or ethnicity. Excuse me, it doesn't let us do residency or ethnicity. We can still capture race of our citations though. 57% of our drivers who are cited are white, 38% are Black, just shy of 1% were American Indian, 1 identified as Pacific Islander, 3% Asian, and 0.2% who are not known.
Lieutenant Snivy.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I had a quick question. I think I know the answer to this, but can you speak to, and if I missed it, I apologize. Can you speak to the Hispanic population not being captured here?
Yep, and so unfortunately, that's the piece of data that we can't capture from the Georgia uniform traffic citations. It doesn't let us account for race or, it doesn't let us account for ethnicity or residency, only for race.
And where are they captured within, are they captured under white or?
So yep, the majority of them are captured under white. As I'm looking across some data for other areas of the report, some identify as Black. So some are Black Hispanic, but the majority identify as white and Hispanic.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I would just add to that, the same in all the social service forms that I use for work, client track, anything the Cobb County puts out, it's the same thing, and the question is just as confusing. And it is very much you have to decide that someone is a race of one thing, and everyone is either this or that in ethnicity, and it causes a lot of confusion asking someone, okay, you're a white Hispanic or a Black Hispanic, so it's confusing across the board at my work as well. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. And you're right, it comes from a federal guideline through the Office of Management and Budget. So all of your government reporting suffers from this confusing metric, which is why we try to spell it out. Citations by age, same thing with this bell curve. Again, if I separate 50 to 59 into those 2 5-year increments, this bell curve continues as we expect it to, with citations peaking at 29. Citations by sex, just a little bit more equal here than our arrests. We have 64% male and 36% female. All right, so now we get into our force data, and we examine our force in a couple of different ways. The first thing that I'll share with you is that the Brookhaven Police Department requires our officers to make a use of force report, whether they use force or if they just threaten to use force by presenting, by deploying a canine, by pointing a gun or a taser, by firing a taser, even if it misses the person, by firing a gun, even if it misses the person. All of those things are required. I'll share with you that that is not a state standard. We're not required to do that. But we made the decision in 2014 or 15 that that was the way we were going to capture these. We've required it ever since, so now we have some robust historical data. And we see that 2 out of 3 times when an officer presents force, they're able to de-escalate the situation without using that force. So we have 186 presentations of force where the force was not actually used, and 94 instances where force was used.
Lieutenant Snively, if you would just briefly cover our review process on the use of forces.
Yeah, that's right. So I mentioned yesterday as we were talking with just your co-chairs. So every use of force in the city of Brookhaven is reviewed 5 times. And it looks sort of like this. The shift supervisor, who is a sergeant, is required to make a use of force report. That report is then reviewed by the shift commander, who is a lieutenant. And then it is reviewed by the division commander, who is a major. From there, the report goes to the Office of Professional Standards, who is another major who is assigned to our Criminal Investigations Division, who reviews one more time for legal and policy considerations. And then after those 4 reviews take place, it comes to me or to whomever is assigned to the training unit to conduct a force analysis and to see if there are any training points that in other words, could this force have been prevented through better training of the officer in that situation? And that's done individually every time as a use of force occurs. Typically that review has occurred within 2 weeks of the date of the force. So the report is required to be filed that day before the officer goes home. And all 5 of those reviews are typically concluded within 14 days. Separately, they get reviewed twice more after that, once a year when I do this data analysis. And then every 3 years, we're independently audited by the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police. They review these annual reports that I've created to assess our compliance there. So ultimately, when it's all said and done, every instance of force has been evaluated 7 times.
And how often does it fall into the category of additional training being needed?
Yeah, so one of the things that we found a couple of years ago, for example, was that a lot of our fights and our physical force applications occurred at the moment a police officer tried to apply handcuffs. And that's pretty common. It's sort of a very real moment, right? And so what we found is that teaching our officers just a more efficient way of applying the handcuffs to get them on faster prevented the opportunity for resistance. And we did see a decrease in our physical fights in that following year.
Wow.
Yep, good questions. So looking at types of force that are applied. So again, I have 186 that are just a display, 61% are physical, or excuse me, 61, a quantity of 61 are physical contact. And by physical contact, we explain it this way. As a police officer, in order to arrest you, I have to touch you. I have to put my hands on your hands and put the handcuffs on you. That is not a use of force. But if I put my hands on you and you pull your hands away and I have to grab them and pull them back down behind you, that is a use of force. It's referred to as soft hands. It's not punching or striking, but we've said we are involuntarily moving their hands behind their back. We're going to consider that a use of force. Police departments in Georgia are allowed to set this threshold themselves. There are other agencies that say it's not a use of force until you punch someone, or it's not a use of force until you throw them onto the ground. We tried to set it at sort of the lowest level possible. So anything above complete compliance out of the person being arrested, we report as a physical contact use of force. Taser deployed, we deployed our tasers 21 times in 2020. That includes only about half of those were successful. So that includes times where we fired our tasers and did not strike the suspect. We deployed canines 11 times, and we used deadly force 1 time last year when our officer fired a rifle at a suspect who was firing a rifle at him. Again, we look at offender residency here, and so we see that 7 out of the 10 people against whom we use force are not residents of the city of Brookhaven. 30% or 29% of them are. There's 1% who are unknown. So again, I told you we do uses of force reports even if that person's not taken into custody. So 3 times last year, we either fired a taser or pointed a gun, and that person ultimately escaped apprehension. We don't know whether they were residents of Brookhaven or not. Same for ethnicity, 76% non-Hispanic, 23% identified as Hispanic, and 1% who got away and we don't know. Offender race, 44% of our the persons against whom we used force were white, 54% were Black, 1% Asian, and 1%, those 3 who escaped, are not known.
One more question, maybe a few more, but one right now. I'm trying to put my arms around the Hispanic population and how you capture that. Now, I just want to make sure I'm clear. It's when you ask them during arrest what their ethnicity is?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And help me understand why that would be to their benefit to actually be honest about it if we're basing it solely on what they say.
Sure. So whether or not it benefits or doesn't, I don't have an opinion. I candidly, I can't see a reason to lie either way, but I'm not sure. In terms of why we rely on that as a measure, it's because we have to. Ethnicity is measured based on how a person self-identifies, and that's the metric that we have to use.
I guess I'm asking because where I go, what I make up is that it may not be in their benefit because they may assume that if you knew they were Hispanic, that may not be a good place for them to be. That's why I'm curious of how much you rely on that data.
Yeah, so I do see your point. Candidly, this is sort of one of the, and this happens across all data sets and all research, right? I wish there were a more precise way to get it, but unfortunately, that's what we have. Yep, but good questions. So presentation and use of force by offender age, again, we see with that expected bell curve, except that a little bit higher in this 30 to 34 category. Previously, for our arrests and citations, we saw higher in the 25 to 29 group. About 8 out of 10 times, the person against whom we're presenting or using force is a male, compared with 21% female. And so after we looked at the use of force by the offender or the arrestee, we also looked at it by the officer to understand what the demographics were of the officers using force. And we see that 61% of our use of force occur by officers who are white, 23% who are Black, just shy of 1% Pacific Islander, 1% Asian, and 14% Hispanic or Latino. Again, I can use Hispanic and Latino here as a race, and the city chooses to do that because that's how we have our officers self-identify during their employment process, as contrasted with the federal standard and the other data sets. So yesterday, we had to talk for quite a while about why it's different in different parts of the report, and that's why. And so here, the metric that we look at, and again, I intentionally did not put conclusions in the report, right? These are supposed to be just data points. These are conclusions for you all to reach, but I'll share with you that one of the things that I look at on this page is I want to make sure that this is not wildly disproportionate from who we employ, right? So as a police department, we employ 55% Black officers, 55% white, 22% Black or African American, 1% Pacific Islander, 3% Asian, and 17% Hispanic or Latino. And so looking across these data points here, that matches pretty closely, nothing of statistical significance from who we employ, right? Looking at the statistics, what are the odds that on a given shift of 10 patrol officers comprised across those demographics, what are the chances of one of those people using force? And this fits pretty well with that model. Looking at our use of force by age, one of the things that someone pointed out is this page might show like, oh, okay, we thought that all the uses of force were going to be young officers, and this shows that that's not the case. I'll caution you, again, this is a question of who we employ. So in Georgia, technically you can be a police officer at 18, but most agencies require you to be 21. And that's because 21 is how old you have to be to buy bullets in the state of Georgia. 21, we, as a police department, have historically hired almost exclusively police officers with experience, usually with 3 or 4 years of experience, which puts us into that 25 to 29 category. So truthfully, this is a question of who we employ. We don't employ any 21-year-olds right now. I'll also share with you, looking at this 35 to 40 group, all 4 of our canine handlers presently are white males between the ages of 35 and 40 years old. So that could be contributing to this data point. Looking at presentation and use of force by officer sex, 91% male, 9% female. Again, pretty consistent with our employees. Even though we have 22% female employees, I've got 2 of those in our command staff. 1 is a detective supervisor, 2 in our community engagement unit. And so that's sort of narrows down. So about 10% of our females are on patrol. So that's as we would expect to see it. This is just putting side by side presentation versus use. This was an interesting finding for us and something that I'm going to explore later this year. I want to know why our Black or African-American officers are presenting force about 10% more often than they're using it. Then I want to know why our Hispanic or Latino officers are using force about 10% more often than they're presenting it. We prepare a different report every year that summarizes every use of force that took place in the city. And it gives us what type of call they were responding to, whether it was citizen or officer initiated, what the dispatch type was, and helps us really understand the context of that use of force. And so I'm going to try to hone in on those uses of force by those officer categories. I'll let you know what I find. By officer age, again, presentation and use in a side-by-side chart. And then presentation versus use of force by officer sex. And you see that's pretty equal for presentation and force. So that was your whirlwind tour over the data and some of the highlights on it. I gave you a little bit of context for what we think some of this means, but the rest of it, I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys can have or might have, or I can just leave and let you guys talk about me after I'm gone.
How many canines do you have?
We have 4. We have 1 canine assigned to each of our 4 patrol shifts.
Any other questions for Lieutenant Snively or Major Harrell while we have them? It's a lot to take in the first time.
It is, yeah. And so I appreciate the invitation to go over it with you. Certainly something that I think it takes some time to soak on and read several times. So if you guys think later and if y'all decide that it's appropriate, Major Harrell and I are always available for your questions. I check my email much more frequently than my wife would prefer. So you guys can reach me by email anytime.
Thank you so much for joining us, Lieutenant Snively, and providing us with the report overview. Thank you as well, Major Harrell.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just let us know whatever you need.
Definitely. So I know we're a little bit over. I apologize for that. The data review takes a while. The icebreaker took longer than I expected, but I thought it would be a good idea to get everyone comfortable with each other. So just any quick reflections on the report that we just walked through? Any initial thoughts that you guys may have that you want to share with the group?
I just want to say, having been in law enforcement, that is one of the most down and dirty but most comprehensive reviews of a department's use of force. Most departments do not do that. I want you to understand that, like what we're seeing from the city of Brookhaven, departments do not do that voluntarily throughout law enforcement. It's just not something they do. The transparency that I see is absolutely amazing, which is just, it's other departments. Other departments will not like Brookhaven PD because they're setting a standard that others will almost have to follow in the future. And we should be more than grateful for what we're getting. I've never seen a report like that explained in that type of manner that wasn't forced by either an FBI investigation or otherwise Justice Department information from the federal level due to civil rights violations en masse in a city. And that is something that is just not done voluntarily. And it makes me appreciate BPD even more and the leadership even more so after that. So for those of you that have never really been around law enforcement, that is a wow factor for me. I was not expecting that when I read the email, nor was I expecting him to get on there and answer questions from the hip so well. It's just not something done. So be grateful for that when you're kind of pouring over and just realize that you're getting a deeper look than most people would be willing to give in that manner and to that level. So
thanks, Davis. And just to add to that, they've we asked for, in our initial meeting, all we asked was for the breakdown by the beats, and then they handed us this very large report in a 45-minute presentation, and Lieutenant Snively and Major Harrell are more than willing, again, within reason, to dig up more of the data and slice and dice it into different ways for us if we want to look at it in different ways.
I would add too that my personal interaction with officers, both on duty and off, is that transparency is very much real for them as well. And you see that and you experience it in how they work. And it's not just a report, but I think the officers know that weight, they carry that. And it is almost like a badge of like, this means more. We are transparent. We're here. We want to do this the right way. That's been my experience across the board, working with not just the agency, but the officers on the ground too. You can feel the data of that report in the way they handle themselves.
A couple interesting points that came up in our meeting with Lieutenant Snively yesterday that I don't think came up today. First is they usually have 8 people patrolling at once, 1 person in every beat. And the way they size the beats is based on what they believe a single officer can service. And so I think the response time is supposed to be somewhere around 6 minutes now. Apparently it was hours before incorporation, and 6 minutes is what BPD has gotten it down to. So as we saw, like the newly annexed areas and things like that, they keep that response time kind of consistent across the various beats and kind of staff appropriately for that as well. And then just to give some context, there's about a total of 60 people on BPD that are part of the Patrol Traffic or Canine Division. They are authorized for 80 individuals. They currently have 75 individuals on staff. So there's about 15 people in various managerial type of positions that aren't actually doing any of the patrolling for the data that we saw today. And those numbers just kind of help contextualize some of the data, right, in terms of how many people are out there and where those people are.
And didn't they just hire 2 mental health workers also? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I read about that, but I don't know much more. But I'm sure we can ask more and get some information about how they are incorporating those mental health workers. And maybe Jeremiah, you have some personal insight into that.
Yeah, they're working on also managing how do we utilize those people correctly when we get calls, like even the dispatch part of it of, hey, this call is a lot more related to this. Let's make sure this unit goes with this kind of resourcing. And it is new for them. So it's something that it may be an area even for us to kind of advocate for. It may be a recommendation from us to as they're learning how to add that to their tasks, to their work. How could they do that effectively? Maybe part of what our subcommittee can focus on too.
Yeah, that is new for them, and they're utilizing it very well. They receive a grant, I believe, to provide this service, and it's working exceptionally well. So if they do get a call with some mental issues, that person goes out with the officer to the call. And this is consistent with the police department. They're always looking for innovative ways to deliver service to our community. As like with the drone program, they now have a drone program also that provides assistance to the officers in the field as they are, encroaching upon a scene or en route to a scene. The drone actually gets there much quicker than an officer going through traffic or, traffic signals. Well, not traffic signals, but they can just put the blue light on and just go. But it does get there quicker, much quicker than the officers.
That makes a lot of sense. And I apologize, Chairman Funny and Yulissa and Leslie, for skipping you at the front. I was kind of trying to get us to the content because we were.
You're good. You're good. I came on late anyway, but you're good. Thank you.
And so what I will do, I think both of those are really good points. I'll reach out to Major Harrell to see if we can start to get some information just around what their general policies are for incorporating the mental health workers, and if they just even have anecdotal data about how it's been going and how that's improved some of the responses. Because I assume since it's relatively new, they probably don't have a full report yet, but maybe that would be part of next year's report. Leslie brought up a good point in chat. Thanks, Leslie. We had a lot of conversation around this yesterday as well, and Lieutenant Snively kind of hinted at it, but it's kind of surprising to see that 70% of the arrests and use of force happen with non-Brookhaven residents within Brookhaven. And some of that is interesting if you think about some of the traffic flow charts we saw earlier on in the commission, where a vast majority of people are leaving and there's this kind of large influx in during the day and large influx out after work hours and back in for residents. And we did some digging into, or I asked the questions around, are there patterns, right? Do we know where people are coming from or where people are going? And the response from Major Harrell and Lieutenant Snively is they've tried to do the analysis before. It's inaccurate because all they have is driver's license information when they can get it, and that can be not great. But that for a long time, Brookhaven, and especially the Buford Highway corridor, was known for, quote, walking ATMs. And so that was people who were maybe of immigrant population that had high cash amounts and were targeted by people for theft purposes. And I don't remember when, maybe Leslie or Mindy remember, but several years ago, they had arrested 3 or 4 people that came down from Memphis specifically to target those folks. And then they started taking a look at, car recoveries and things like that, where they, from 2017, thanks, Mindy. Where are they picking up cars that have been stolen out of Brookhaven? And again, the data is just kind of everywhere, right? Generally South Atlanta, but just kind of all over the place. So there wasn't a lot of patterns, but at the same time, it's a really good point about what does that mean for us as we look and analyze the data and try to make sure that force is being, or even citations and everything is kind of being applied fairly amongst the population.
And few of the homeless would originally be a Brookhaven resident if they even had a driver's license. And so the people that typically run into officers more often and deal with that may skew that data a little bit too. That was a question I had afterwards that I may follow up on later, but.
That's a good point. Any other thoughts around that observation?
Yeah, I just want to kind of build on Leslie's point, which is I think, what this group is going to have to grapple with in terms of asking the right questions is, as we think about how do we practice equity as it pertains to policing, I think a lot of our default notions are, well, is it impacting a disproportionate number when compared to residents? And they've made very clear that it's difficult to measure that. And so I think one of the questions, we talk about asking the right questions. One of the questions that this group is going to have to grapple with is what is our obligation, our duty to looking at equitable impact of non-residents?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Mindy, because regardless of if they're Brookhaven residents or not, we still want them to be treated fairly within Brookhaven and by the police department. I'm going to write that one down.
Mr. Co-Chair?
Yes.
I have another observation, and I'm not sure how we can wrestle with this, but just from knowing the fact that white Hispanics are included with the white population, 2 things wrong there. We're overstating the white number and we are commingling the Hispanic. And I know that's nothing that they can fix because they're utilizing the forms that they're provided by the federal government. And I also think that Commissioner Henson also attributed to that conversation because it's the form. But from our perspective, when you dilute that white number, it's going to be a lower number. And then when you look at the African-American number, it's a high number. So we need to wrestle with that some way or another. I don't know how, but there needs to be some dialogue around that because it sends a message. And I don't know what the message is saying, but there's a message there. So just food for thought. How do we wrestle that? You don't have to answer that tonight, just food for thought.
No, well, one of the things I was thinking about while you were just talking, Chairman Funny, is that I wonder if we can ask for a breakdown of how those Hispanic populations responded to the race question as well, right? So it was like out of the 23% that responded as Hispanic, how many of them self-identified as Black, how many of them self-identified as white? and try to either get a new version of the chart or back into a new version of the chart, looking at those numbers to see if we can find the intersection there. And so go ahead, Connie, sorry.
Somehow putting our arms around that. John, that's where I was going, even with the questions that I had as he did the presentation, is that's going to be really vital information, if not able for us to capture it, to draw attention to it in terms of recommendations potentially. And what I make up is that the Hispanic population may not say, yep, I'm Hispanic, so now you can decide what you're going to do with me after you arrest me. That's just probably not in their DNA, especially if it's more than a single offense. So I'm just wondering even how they're looking at how well they may be doing or not doing within a population, if in fact that is part of the driving force for how they calculate equity in force or arrests or what have you.
And that actually reads to, sorry, Kathy, go ahead.
I would also like to add that, is that also the same with the employee numbers? Like 55% of the people the police hired there are white. Are Hispanic white included in that number? Those are some things that we need to define clearly. Because if that's the same thing, if that's included in just the white Caucasian population, we need to make certain so we can delineate what is what in that situation. Because you can identify, they only use Hispanic for, they used to use it just for the censor. When they came around to do the census. So it's hard to define that population because of the Latinos that come from all areas. So, but I definitely want to know, is that also the case when it comes to employment?
I think for employment, and I'll have to pull up the report to check. I think that's why it adds just more to the confusion is in the employment data, they actually include Hispanic inside the race because as they're going through the job application, I think it's included in the race section. So they capture it there. So you're choosing between white, black, or Hispanic. Whereas like the census does, you have to choose Hispanic or non-Hispanic and then choose white, black, Asian, or, you know, whatever your race may be. So I think maybe, right, we don't know, but maybe the employment data in that regard is more accurate than the arrest data is.
So would people from the Middle East say they're Asian? Or how would?
It's all over the place. I'm Pakistani, I say I'm Asian.
Okay.
There's not really a good option there.
Right.
I think that's a very good question, actually. From Middle East, you know, since they don't fall under Asian, they don't fall under any of those categories.
Right.
They generally consider themselves as whites.
Yeah.
And that's how they get categorized as whites.
I think the census guideline is for North Africa and Middle East to categorize as white.
Correct.
It's not really accurate though, is it?
And that goes to Connie's
Convenient.
Caucasian.
Convenient. It's very convenient.
Nobody wants to be black. As long as you don't have
Nobody
to be black, you're good.
Who wants to be black in America?
It's also why they have the security blanket of always saying self-report. It's not
Yeah.
anyone making that decision, and yet so many decisions are made on a lot of those guidelines,
race.
and that's why we have those issues.
Yeah.
And then we have that safety blanket of, well, we didn't say they were this, said that.
Yeah.
And so it is, and I think there's something to be said about we're a small subcommittee of a small commission of a small city of a large city, but ripples of what we do still impact. And if Brookhaven PD can advocate for, hey, this is change needs to happen on the federal guideline because it doesn't make sense for the transparency we're trying to have, maybe that's even bigger impact that we can have.
Yeah, that's to Davis's point of, you know, if we're innovating and kind of leading the pack, people are going to be following us. So if we can think of better ways to get even self-reported data or more accurate reported data, that would be interesting.
Yeah. And just, you know, I don't know, you know, how much contact you guys have with reporting on things like that, but so many of these reports that I remember filling out, were just senseless questions to the officer filling it out. And it turns out that it was a question needing to be answered for a study because Congress wanted a study from 6 years ago due to budgetary concerns. Well, if you think 5 years ago, 4 years ago, the hot topic was immigration from Central America and Mexico, right? And so everybody wanted to know who was Hispanic and who wasn't Hispanic, because we wanted to know, what's this population? How bad is the problem in America? Was kind of the mind frame or the mindset of those in the upper echelons of law enforcement. And so that filtered down to, my guess is that filtered down to reporting the fact that we only categorize people as Hispanic or non-Hispanic. And then we break you down into 5 races, but Hispanic isn't one of them, is kind of odd. And it's I hadn't seen it. So I've been out of law enforcement now for 5 years. And in Alabama, I would have marked you as Black, white, Hispanic, American Indian, but there wouldn't have been a Pacific Islander. That's not even a thought, in rural Alabama. So many of those things are driven by studies that we don't even know about, and questions that very human people, unfortunately, are asking in the halls of Congress and this, those legislative houses. And they want to know, well, how can we decide who to give money to or who not, or what problem to address, when it's an extremely small thing, but because they're human, it becomes their focus. And so we can help change that, right? We can help drive that. And that is something that we can do as a very small subcommittee in a very small city. And as part of the bigger thing of Atlanta, we can make lasting impact. And it won't be today, it won't be tomorrow, but guys, I'm fired up in a positive way to serve alongside you, to answer questions from my own personal background, and to ask questions of all of you, because we come from such a varied array of backgrounds and interactions with law enforcement. So I'm pumped by this. And just know that some of those questions that he was answering for us and that data they provided, they don't even know why they take that data down. They just know it's part of the report. And it can be hard when you're doing the report. You're like, why am I doing this? And it's for something that somebody, what would we say, way above our pay grade wants to know. So that's it though. But I'm excited to be here. So looking forward to our next meeting.
Thanks, Davis. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I know we're very over, and I again do apologize for not bucketing enough time, but this was a great discussion. But just to kind of think of what's next and kind of moving forward from here, I've captured a lot of notes here. I think one of the things from Davis's points that I'll also reach out and ask for is just, what does the report look like, right? So that we can see what the officers are filling out and see, sometimes those questions can be worded strangely, or it can be ambiguous and stuff like that too, which can lead to misreporting or just sheer human error. So one of the things that I've been trying to figure out how we can do or try to approach is, this is great that we got the Brookhaven data, but how do we compare Brookhaven to other like cities? Or how do we compare our policies to other innovative police departments that are trying different policies and trying different things to see, how well do we actually stack up against other police departments who are trying to solve similar problems? And so one suggestion from Lieutenant Snively is there's a database called LEMAS, LEMAS. I haven't dug into it. I can send the URL. I have it in my notes here, that I found yesterday, but he even admitted that it would be relatively difficult to pull data from that. But one thing, we don't have to solve this right now, but one thing I'd like everyone to do is just kind of on your own time, and I will do the same, is just try to find some information, right? So I know, for example, I listened to a podcast about, MPD 250 and kind of what's going on in Minneapolis and what the historical stuff there was, right? And I might go back to some of the resources that they provided, and I can share with the subcommittee about just kind of what the historical reason for the police departments taking the actions that they're taking are. I know there's other police departments across the US that I've read about that are deploying mental health staff, right? And obviously we have to be cognizant of the fact that you can't compare New York City to Brookhaven, very different populations, very different responses and everything like that. But at the same time, who are the cities that we can look at and maybe even aspire to emulate in some way if their policies make more sense or seem to be more progressive than what we have?
Did I hear on a previous meeting or something that we had, and I may have seen it from perusing the website, we have access to complaints that have been lodged against the Brookhaven police? Can we get that?
I believe that is on the transparency report on the site, but let me look into that.
That'd be good information.
And Davis brought up a good point in chat that Chamblee, Dorville, Dunwoody, Duluth, and Norcross, as well as Sandy Springs, getting their data might be helpful. And they are trying to be innovative as well. So I can see if there's any way that Major Harrow, Lieutenant Snively could help us get a similar report from those departments. Okay, great. So again, in terms of next steps, I think it would behoove us to take a step back, look at the data again, take a look at the actual policies. I don't know how many people have had time to read the policies and kind of dig into them, but I'm sure once we dig into those policies, it'll be, we might have some more questions and may want to bring Major Harrell back and then take a look at other police departments. And what I'd encourage everyone to do is, as you guys are finding these materials, to share them with the group so that we can all kind of look at them in real time and work through it together as a team. So the next topic is scheduling the next meeting, everyone's favorite calendar game. So first and foremost, it seems like, based on attendance, that this time slot around 7 p.m. seems to work well for everyone. It's consistent with our full commission meeting. So just kind of want from the group all who is here, does this generally, this sort of time slot work for you in the evenings?
That's still looking at like once a month as a meet, or it's a lot more doable if it's once a month for me.
Well, that was going to be my next question. So go ahead, Connie.
Is it, and I can do 7, I want to be clear. Is anybody open to doing it earlier than 7?
Kathy says yes.
It's me and you, Kathy. Oh.
I can do earlier than 7 as well.
My schedule is also insane, so don't base a lot of it on me. It would depend on the week. It depends on what's going on that month or that week.
I have an 8-month-old, so either way, I'm suing for peace with my wife. It just depends on which hour. She likes it earlier because then I can help with bedtime.
Right.
So we could try maybe 5:30 or 6 next time. Give everyone some time to get off of work and be prepared. Does that sound like a better time?
Or to stay at work and
Or to stay at
home these days, but yeah.
Okay, we'll try that. And then in terms of meetings, I know that it becomes a lot having the full commission meeting and the subcommittee meeting, but at the same time, we do have a lot of content that we need to get through in terms of just kind of wrapping our hands around it, getting the responses to some of these questions and digging back into it. And I trust that everyone's gonna, do the homework like we always do. So I was thinking maybe once every 3 weeks is kind of the schedule. Every 2 weeks felt it was a little bit intense, but every 3 weeks is still a little bit more than once a month, right? As time goes on. Does that seem like a cadence that works for the group? Maybe, maybe not. Does it seem like not enough? Does it seem like too much? What are you guys'
Can you
thoughts?
say that again? The cadence that you suggested?
Every 3 weeks. So every 3 weeks we would get together as a subcommittee for the meeting.
How long are the meetings? Are we better served to do every 2 weeks and actually stick to an hour and we keep moving the ball? Or is it a longer meeting every 3 weeks? I'm flexible. I can almost do whatever you all decide.
I would really like us to stick to an hour if possible. And so if we feel like we want to do every 2 weeks and make sure that it is an hour and keep it concise, I'm totally on board with that. I just didn't want to feel like we were overloading the group. Do you guys want to try that to start then? Connie's idea, we'll have a hard stop 7 p.m. We'll start at 6 p.m. and we'll go into a bi-weekly cadence from here.
Oh, way to put it on me, SJREC. I really appreciate that. I was trying to mute myself. Way to go.
I just have a question, SJREC. The
Yes.
questions that we brought up during this meeting, those questions that we brought up, you're recording those and we'll present those to PDP?
Yes.
And then
Yeah,
they
so-
will be able to come back to quickly respond to those,
Yeah.
prior to our meeting, so we could, that we could get a written response probably, and then we can respond to it during the meeting. That would kind of expedite what we're doing.
I totally agree, Kathy. So what I was planning on doing is sending these questions out to the group after the call, just to make sure I'm not misrepresenting anything, as well as getting feedback if you guys think of more questions. And honestly, I agree with you that there's no reason for us to wait for a meeting to have any discussion. Major Harrell has been very responsive. Every time I email her, she's like back to me in a couple of hours, right? So we can use them as a resource. They're very willing to help. So I would encourage all of us to keep the conversation going over email outside of the meetings.
Just to add, Mr. Co-Chair, Commissioner Arif, today we set up Basecamp. You should have gotten an email from Jalissa. That's going to be another great way to communicate. It has a chat feature. It has a share this file feature. So that's exciting because I know the co-chairs have been asking for a tool to use for communicating quickly. So you don't have to email, you can actually use the tool and it'll send a prompt message to the member and they'll know that there's a message there. So that way, Commissioner Arif, you always have them at your fingertip.
Excellent. And show of hands, who's logged into Basecamp today? Excellent. There's 3 of us on there. So that's pretty good. If everyone could go, it's pretty easy. You just, Ulysses sent links to everybody. I think you'll get a couple, one for our team and one for the commission. But if you just register through one, you'll have everything available to you there. So you only have to go through that once. And I just use my email address. You don't have to link it to Google or Facebook or anything like that if you don't want to. So what I'll do for now is I'll send this one in email, just since most people haven't signed up for Basecamp yet. But moving forward, we'll move all of our conversations over to Basecamp just to make it a little bit more real time. Okay, and the last thing on the agenda is a use of force training. Now, the thing about the use of force training is it's a little bit tricky. It does have to be during, I think, work hours or maybe a Saturday during a day, which I know can be difficult for all of us just because of when the department has availability. But the first thing I wanted to do was kind of understand from the group who would be willing to go on site for the full training where you would go through the simulation itself. So the way it works is there's a session where you go through kind of the policies and procedures. And then there's a session where you go through the simulation as if you were having to use the force in kind of a role play situation. So who's willing to do the in-person aspect of that? Okay. Davis is like, I've done this. It could be fun experience. Okay, that's great. Well, I appreciate that. So what I will do is I'll let Major Harrell know that we are interested in the in-person, and then not waste everyone's time here, figure out what works, what are some available slots for the department and what timeframes work best, and come back to the group with suggestions. And yes, Julissa, the next meeting would be Wednesday, the 21st at 5:30 p.m. Thank you. Okay, so before we adjourn, any questions, comments, concerns? I hope this was an informative session for everyone, and I hope everyone's as pumped as Davis is. I love the enthusiasm.
Great meeting.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you guys have a great evening, and I look forward to talking to you all next time.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Night.